So now that we had a little bit of time to review the incident and, get input, kind of gain more perspective around the incident that occurred last week, how Amanda's feeling about it, what you saw, etc. We're going to shift to talking a little bit more about Amanda and her needs, her disability, the diagnoses that she has, and how those, may have played a role in the incident that occurred. And so, and then we're going to talk about her evaluation a little bit, her needs, and then shift into talking a little bit about her IEP as it relates to the incident. So I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Van Oss, the school psychologist. His area of expertise and really the role he plays in this manifestation determination meeting is to share more about those diagnoses and how they could have played a role here. So
yeah, and I know we were all at the table last year in 5th grade when we did a reevaluation. So this is a little bit of review, but I think it's important. So just to summarize, she does have that diagnosis of ADHD, and it's the combined type. So there's the inattentive, daydreamy, and the impulse control. Like, hey, I got to think and slow down before I'm acting. Yeah. And there's also the anxiety diagnosis. And I just, mentioned earlier, she does kind of come to my office and vent. And, a lot of us are able to kind of take stressors and push it to the side, get our job done. But she struggles with that. Those diagnoses are part of why, way back when she initially qualified for special education, why she has that classification of other health disabilities on her IEP. But last year, when we gathered all that information, did a new evaluation and just kind of checked on her current needs, yeah, those diagnoses, I would say, are really impacting her at school, and it's driving a lot of what we put into her IEP last year. The anxiety, venting to me is one example, but there's things in her IEP about like how throughout the day are we allowing her to manage her stress level and her anxiety. There's things in her IEP about the inattention, how we get her to be able to control her attention. And yeah, that impulse control, which we're going to touch on soon. Just one more thing, I think the behavior patterns we see with Amanda the most are that, hey, it's really tough for me to follow instructions, especially in classes where the subject matter is difficult for her, like math in particular. She is so social and just easy to get along with, but if you're her math teacher, you're kind of up against it because math is not her favorite thing, right? And when she is trying to, there's a really tough problem or something and she's really struggling, or maybe she came in and was having a tough day, so just that math she knows how to do is just that much tougher. She'll try and pull back from it and say like, hey, can I go talk to Mr. Van Oss, or can I go do this? And when it's not working for her and she's just not able to get out of that work, she kind of ups the ante. And that's where some of the swearing, for example, can come out and kind of an outburst. Doesn't happen super often. But when we talked about it last year, we were kind of painting that picture of kind of the root cause of those patterns is Amanda wants to get out of work or activities she's not vibing with. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else to add, team? Or
yeah, anything from your lens, Kevin, in terms of how she's functioning at home, or any kind of health updates in terms of, I know you've been working with a psychiatrist, any counseling, just trying to get a full picture of what she needs and where she's at right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, when at home, when I try to get her to help around the house, do some chores, she will sort of find ways to get out of that, or to try to will demonstrate some of those similar things even at home.
Okay.
Yeah. We do have a doctor appointment set up to kind of revisit the medication, see if the anxieties get in the way, seeing what those if they're effective or helpful. And yeah, the psychiatrist that we're scheduled to kind of connect with hopefully will also help.
Okay, great. Yep. Any other counseling outside of school right now in place?
Not right now.
Okay.
No.
Okay, helpful. So want to spend a little bit of time now talking about her IEP in terms of her goals and her services and those supports. Again, we're not going to go through everything in the IEP. We're really focused in on those components that relate to the incident that occurred. So, this incident happened in math, which has been historically a really hard space for Amanda. We've considered in the past, special ed math services, but she really does have the skills to be successful in the general
Mhm.
curriculum. So we really want to keep her in that regular math class. So in order to do it, she's got that paraprofessional support. And that's really the only class right now that she has that support in. And that para is there to help her follow those directions, to persist when she's frustrated, to help implement some of those BSP strategies. A couple to point out are just chunking her work so she doesn't get that overwhelmed, kind of worried feeling. And then creating behavior momentum. So starting with maybe some simpler problems and then building up her confidence just right there in that class. So the para and her math teacher do work together on those things to help just set her up for success. And then we're working on her ability to just follow those directions. Even if she thinks she's not going to be successful, even if she doesn't know exactly what to do, even if she doesn't want to do it, following directions of the teacher and knowing the supports that she has in place. So I've been working on that a lot with her in my services when she comes to see me every day. And we're working on a lot of different strategies to help her better follow directions.
Yeah. So even, her goal is following instructions,
yes.
right? But there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
It's the frustration, the persistence.
Yes.
So Ms. Woodward's working on a whole bunch of stuff to kind of move that needle on following instructions.
So I want to share with you a little bit more about her progress. Again, we talked about, these incidents don't happen often, but they do happen, these outbursts. So we do track. So that's what this graph is showing you, just, the number of kind of those outbursts. And they have gotten less frequent, but sometimes they're still pretty significant, which again is why we're here today. So that's for you to just kind of see where she's heading that way.
So those are all, Kevin, all referrals where she was directed out of class to the reset room.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that makes sense.
So we celebrate the improvement in frequency, but we're still concerned about how heightened and escalated Amanda can get in some of these situations. The other thing here I wanted to share with you is her goal around following directions. So we collect data on that. Her para helps collect data on that in class. And you can see some progress, but she's not on track right now to meet her goal. And in my class, she's doing very well in the kind of simulations we do and the scenarios and that kind of small setting. We're still working on transferring that into kind of the real situation, if you will. And so just continuing to partner with her paraprofessional on setting her up for success there. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if there's just anything else that I wanted to highlight. But I think those are some of the most important things. We have those accommodations in math. We're trying to support her there. She can use a calculator. She's got some of those supports in place. And then we review that behavior support plan with her para, with her teacher, even with Amanda, so she knows how to set herself up for success. So any questions about those highlights from her IEP as they relate?
No, thank you.
Okay.
So I think at this point, we'd like to kind of discuss that piece Ms. Woodward talked about at the beginning of the meeting, those two big questions we have to answer.
Yeah, so we're going to talk through and Mr. Van Oss has his computer open. We have a form that we fill out during a manifestation determination meeting. And, I think what's important to know, Kevin, is that as we work our way through these questions, it's really the school team's responsibility to bring that expertise to the table to help determine, is this a manifestation? Was this incident directly related to Amanda's disability or caused by her disability, or was it a result of us failing to implement her IEP as we've agreed upon? So we're going to look at each of those questions individually. And then we're going to check for agreement at the end. And then again, talk about any implications that you have as a parent in terms of your rights. So any questions about what's next?
Nope, makes sense to me.
All right, team. So let's start with that first question. Was the conduct that occurred, so her yelling at the math teacher, shoving her out of the way, and then ultimately finding the knife, those are like the three big things we're looking at. Were those incident or those aspects of the conduct in question caused by or directly related to Amanda's disability? And we were looking at all of the data, and really, Kevin, we as a district believe that they were directly related. We've talked about a lot of those things here at the meeting, in terms of her anxiety, that fear. When we talk about the knife, one of the most serious components of this incident, she has this sense that she needs to protect herself. And so we really have to talk about that, and how to help her with that and make good decisions around what it means to be safe. And then that the ADHD combined type, when she's frustrated, she's still acting really impulsively, is what we're seeing. We would say yes as a district. Thoughts on that?
I agree. I mean, she can be really impulsive and make some decisions that obviously she isn't thinking through at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Mr. Van Oss is going to note the answer to that question is yes. Principal Matson, anything to add there from your lens?
No.
Okay. And then if the conduct in question was a direct result of our failure to implement the IEP. And so again, we looked at that as a team. We thought about, were there any parts of her IEP? We talked to her gen ed teacher. We got her information about the supports that were in place that day. And we weren't seeing any obvious evidence that we didn't implement her IEP. Her pair was in place that day. Her behavior plan was being implemented. It wasn't a successful outcome that day, but all of those supports were in place. That doesn't mean we don't want to talk about maybe some changes that we might want to make, right, to prevent this from happening. But as it's currently written, we found that everything was in place. Did you get any other input from Amanda or any other perspectives that you have there, Kevin?
I haven't.
Okay. So then that would be a yes as well.
Yep, I'll note that. Okay.
And so then I think it's just, so that results in us saying, because we answered yes to both of those, we answered yes to the first question, but we would answer no to the second, just to be clear. It was not a result of us failing to implement the IEP. So because of that, we would say this was a manifestation of Amanda's disability, kind of bringing us back to that term we used at the beginning of the meeting. And so I just wanted to, again, check with you, like the district feels really confident in that decision. Any disagreement for you as the parent there?
No, that sounds like Amanda in a nutshell, basically.
Okay. We have now made that decision that the incident that occurred last week is a manifestation of Amanda's disability. So we're going to shift the focus of the meeting now to talking about what's next. So Ms. Matson is going to explain a little bit about what that means just in terms of discipline. And then Mr. Van Oss is going to talk about some things we've been discussing and some ideas we have for Amanda's plan and making some changes to just prevent this from happening in the future.
Yep. So Kevin, since we determined it was a manifestation of her disability, the district cannot pursue any further disciplinary action. We want to make sure that she stays safe and also that the building stays safe. So Mr. Van Oss is going to go over what that's going to look like and how we can help support you guys as a family.
Okay.
Yeah, so I connected with Ms. Woodward and we just have a couple of ideas we want to see what you think of. So behavior obviously is the big one, but first of all with math, we did talk about when she's in her math class, we could modify some of the problems that are put in front of her because we are chunking, but when there are certain really tough things that are like new for her, the teacher would like do some of the work so that Amanda's only doing the new part. So she wouldn't have to think through so many things she's learned before, if that makes sense. She'd only have to kind of apply the new skill that they just taught in class. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
We think that might like be a nice thing to kind of ramp up when she's learning these new skills. Okay, let me just jot that one down.
Sure. While he's writing, the other thing that we had talked about is a break card. So that when Amanda is in a state where she thinks she needs to go. So like even let's think back to this incident, she was being told to stay, she was getting overwhelmed and upset, and the strategy she used was shoving the teacher out of the way. And we'll get to some of that in terms of what the adults are going to do in a little bit. But we thought it would be helpful for Amanda to just have a card to show, and that means that she can take a break no matter the situation. She can take a break and come to me in the resource room so that we can kind of figure out what's going on and what our next best steps are together, and creating a safe place for her and a better alternative than what she did in the incident. Okay.
Yeah, and about that, leaving the classroom, she was blocked from leaving the classroom. So we were thinking of adding to her behavior plan language around, we don't want to block her in that way in the school building. I think a thing to think about, she doesn't have that history like some of our students do of when they, leave the classroom and then scoot out of the building. She's never done that before, knock on wood. Yeah. But if she were ever to do that, we would have to kind of follow her for her own safety, keep her away from the highway. But as far as in the building, kind of we would write in, we're not going to be blocking kind of entryways, exit ways, like that. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. I think that'll be good for her anxiety to have like a break card or something to signal that, communicate that.
And we did appreciate her input that blocking the door was a trigger for her. So it just, again, hopefully she'll feel heard in terms of the plans we're making for next steps.
Yeah. And the last piece we had kind of talked about, and I know Ms. Madsen referenced the school safety, and I appreciate, Kevin, you had that conversation with her about the knife. But in the past, when similar incidents have happened, one of the things we've put on the table is, if her backpack every day, if she could check in with our dean and just do a really quick check on the backpack, that's what we'd like to propose.
Make sure nothing's in there.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I'll run it. I'll tell her that's going to happen. It's going to be
that would be really
step.
Great.
Yeah, cool. And then we're going to keep working on these skills with her. And I think now, knowing what we know in terms of how big this got, that helps me as her teacher really understand how to intensify and maybe better target some of the learning that we're doing together. And I've got some great ideas, and Mr. Van Ass and I will partner on that too, just to make sure that we're really showing up for her, especially in these first few days as she's coming back from such a big incident.
Okay. Yeah. It's just like bowling, like the bumpers are there.
Yeah.
We just need to adjust the bumpers for Amanda right now to help her out while she's learning those skills.
Yeah. Great. So any questions?
No, I think I understand it.
Okay. So as always, we'll write this all up for you. We'll make the changes to her IEP, to her behavior support plan, and then write that out in that prior written notice for you to review and think about. And then once you get that paperwork, Kevin, if you have any questions, just call me and we can talk through them. And then, we're going to want to, connect with her right away when she comes back to school as a group, and just get her started on a better track.
Okay. Yeah. And as far as unusual paperwork, the form that I was filling out during the meeting about those 2 big questions. So I'm going to print that out before we leave. That's kind of why I was working on it during the meeting.
Yep.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first question we're trying to answer to figure out if the incident was a manifestation of her disability is if the conduct in question was caused by or had a direct and substantial relationship to the student's disability. And based on everything that we talked about, the district really believes that it does. The knife was related to her anxiety, and that just impulsivity in terms of shoving the teacher out of the way, definitely related to the patterns of behavior we've seen with her ADHD combined type. So we really do think that, yes, that's related. The second question that we also need to answer is if the conduct in question was the direct result of the school's failure to implement the IEP. So as we had talked about on that day, we had multiple paraprofessional absences, and she did not have her paraprofessional in class with her that day, which is a really important integral support to Amanda. So from the lens of the district and some of what we've looked at, we would have to say that was caused, also a result of her not having that support. So kind of a double whammy here in terms of answering these questions. So would you agree with that from your lens, Kevin, as the parent?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So what we want to do now is shift to talking about what's next with some of this. And I think maybe let's just start with that last question we answered around the district's failure to implement the IEP, and just her simply not having that paraprofessional support that day. So Ms. Mattson, would you like to speak to that part a little bit?
Yeah, so again, what Mrs. Woodward said, and I apologize, the ball was dropped. It just is unfortunate this happened during that same time. I can assure you it won't happen again, but really we're going to be very diligent and careful in the future, making sure that all the paraprofessionals are covered, and if not, making sure that that's on me. So
yeah. So we're gonna just like have some closer communication, just knowing how important and the critical maybe impact it has for Amanda not having a para.
Right.
When we're short paras, which happens lately more than not, just what decisions are we going to make to ensure she's got that support, even if that means, someone else flexing into the space for that day. So we're really going to monitor that more closely.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And just as a paperwork, Kevin, so I've been filling out a form as this conversation just happened about those two big questions, and I put the answers kind of we arrived at. So that means that we're saying as a team and as a district that this incident was a manifestation of Amanda's disability, and that means, right, Ms. Mattson, like the district can't pursue any further disciplinary action.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I'm going to print this form before we leave today.
Okay.
As well. That's kind of why I was doing it in the middle of the meeting. Yeah.
So now we'll spend some more time just talking a little more about any changes we're going to make to her IEP and to her plan. So we'll dive into that. Okay.